I've been wanting to turn a thin-walled bowl. And in that, I mean a bowl that you only turn once. Usually when I turn a bowl, I'll make an intermediate step and let that dry for a year or more, and then finish turn it to get to the final shape. And there's a technique where you turn a piece of wet wood to the final shape right in one go. And then that bowl will dry and sort of deform and change shape and become the final piece on its own in a way. So it's 16 inches wide. I probably want to be a little smaller than that, like 14. And my screw is at 8, so I probably want to move it to 7. So I have a piece of maple that I got when I was chainsaw milling up a maple tree with my friend Gabe, and this is a part of one of the branches. Now it's dried a little bit, and it's probably dried really more than it should be for what I'm trying to do, but this is what I have. Now the crack you can see in it, I was hoping I would turn it deep enough where that crack would go away, but in the end it came back to haunt me. So when I make a blank for a bowl in a bandsaw, usually I have a thin blade and I rotate the piece in the blade to get a circle. All of my thin blades are dull, and I found oftentimes the blade will just get stuck and get jammed in the piece of wood trying to do it that way. So I was trying a different method where I use my same jig on the bandsaw and I make lots of short straight cuts to get to something that's close to a circle. And really for putting it on the lathe, it just has to be close. It doesn't have to be a perfect circle. So I attached a faceplate and I began to turn on the lathe, and I worked on the outside and the outside bottom. The other thing I was really trying to do with this bowl was up my technique. I've been watching a lot of folks turn. I've realized that my technique has never been that great as I'm self-taught at this, and I've always just kind of figured it out as I go. So I've been trying to do a steeper angle and cutting on the sides of the bowl gouge instead of with the tip. So once I had the outside cleaned up, I could make the tenon for the chuck. And I got that to the right size and shape where it would fit the chuck. Then I could take it off the lathe and take the faceplate off and turn the piece around and mount it in the chuck. I let it sit overnight at this point, and I buried it in the wood shavings just to keep it from drying out. Now it's never exactly in the same center when you flip the piece around, so I resurfaced the outside. And I tried a little scraping, but I still wasn't getting the surface that I really wanted. So to get the piece more balanced, I faced the top and got that ready and carved down to more the level that I wanted, trying to get rid of that crack. Then I went back to the bowl gouge and really trying to get the best surface I could with that, trying different shear cuts with the side of the gouge. And it's funny because it'll go along and it'll be bouncing and chattering and just won't seem to be working, and then you'll hit just the right angle and just the right pressure, and it'll just all of a sudden the wood just melts away and it just feels like it's working exactly how it's supposed to be. And the surface is much, much better than I was getting. Now I sanded the outside and I put finish on, and I was thinking I would leave it overnight and work on the inside the next day, but it ended up being a few days before I got back to this. I was working on the water tank during the day, which was the last video, and working on this at night. But it cracked, and it cracked worse, and it was starting to dry out. So then I stupidly let it sit too long, and now it started to crack. So I think I have to turn this finish I put on it off and take it down below these cracks. So I ended up having to turn down that nice surface that I had made. So I returned the outside and made the bowl a little smaller and got in some more practice on my surfacing with the bowl gouge, which maybe is the whole point of this bowl, but I'm getting much better at it. Then I resanded the outside and got the outside basically finished. Then I started right away on the inside. Now what I want to turn are really thin walls, and the technique that I've seen for doing this is to carve out about a 2-inch deep, maybe 4 centimeter deep hollow in the bowl and work that right up to the edge and turn the final thickness on the outside rim of the bowl at that depth. And that gives you support with the really thin edge because it isn't very tall at that point. Then once that's finished, you do a second step and you dig out the second hollow in the bowl and you work that right up to the edge. And then a third and then a fourth, and you sort of keep stepping down into the bowl. Once you've made a step, you can't go back to the previous step because there isn't enough support on the thin rim of the bowl. And the technique with this too that I wanted to try was to shine a light through the wood to see the thickness. Once you get the side of the bowl thin enough, you can see the light through the wood, and you can see how thick you're turning that side. And it worked pretty well. It didn't shine through quite as much as I thought it would, but it worked. And I tried it with the light on the opposite side of the tool, and that worked. Doing that, you have to look at where the light is and kind of feel the tool on the other side where it's cutting, and watch how the light is changing on the side where the light is. And then I tried it with the light on the same side that you're cutting, and this worked too. I think the issue sometimes is the chips build up on this side, and I think that really has more to do with the shape of the bowl. It's one side or the other. It's sort of whichever side seems to work better. I think with this bowl it seemed to work a little better cutting with the light on the same side as the tool. Okay, so I think I'm done turning this. I was amazed at how well I was able to make it thin. I think my turning technique's gotten a lot better, but the bowl is coming apart as I look at it. The crack on each side has just been growing by the minute, basically. So I'm actually going to let it sit and see what happens to it. It's too thin at this point to fill this in and then return it, but maybe there's a way to fix it and then just leave it. That could be cool. So anyways. So I let it sit for a couple of days, and the cracks actually closed up and sort of went back together again. I think the bowl was beginning to change shape, and the sides where there aren't the cracks were starting to deform and pushing the cracks back together again. So it's not quite a circle anymore. So I was trying to figure out if there was a good way to clamp it and kind of bring it back to being a circle. So I tried that with the rim jaws. Then I tried it with a band clamp, and that didn't really work as well as I'd hoped it would. I was hoping putting pressure on it would sort of force it back into being a circle, but it didn't. So I just put it in the chuck as best I could and put the tailstock on. This was all to turn the bottom of the bowl. And actually, before this, I photographed it. In the event that this didn't work and I ended up ruining the bowl, I would at least have sort of a finished thing to show for this video. I turned the bottom and it actually went pretty well. I did a lot of looking beforehand at where the bottom of the inside of the bowl was, so I had a memory of what I could carve. And it was a little bit tricky because on the end grain I was cutting into the form And on the side grain, I was leaving a bump because it wasn't really a circle. So I had to sort of blend all that together when I sanded the base. But it actually worked. And I have a very thin-walled bowl almost down to the foot. And instead of trying to do the center of the bottom on the lathe, I just sanded a flat spot on the bottom. That seems safer. So I'm completely amazed that I was able to turn this so thin. I had my doubts that that was really going to work. And the wood is absolutely beautiful for just a piece of maple firewood. So the thing to figure out is what to do with the crack at each side. And since they've gone back together, I think the default is to let it dry a little bit more and just glue the cracks together. It's too thin to cut the bowl in half and then build some spacer piece that fills that in like I've done in the past, because I can't really turn it again at this point. So whatever I would do would have to be something that would happen, and then that's what it would be. It wouldn't get turned again. One thought is that one of the reasons for turning a bowl this thin is to then carve it and start to do work on the bowl after it's been turned. So that might be one option too. I do want to do more of these. I think next time I need to find a fresher piece of wood, something that's a little wetter and hasn't started to crack. And maybe even something that moves more when it dries, like some kind of fruit wood, like cherry or plum or apple would be really kind of fun. Thanks for watching.